On this Wednesday night, the finance minister's $41,000 revelation.
I want to apologize for this error.
Bill Morneau admits he just repaid tens of thousands of dollars to the We charity for a trip he and his family took 3 years ago.
You just repaid it today on the same day you were expected to testify under oath about it. Is that just a coincidence, Minister?
What could ruin plans to go back to class?
We will almost certainly identify cases of COVID-19 in students and staff in the fall.
New warnings about a summer surge of COVID-19 and what it could lead to. And separating fact from falsehoods about face masks.
I'm just tired of all the conflicting information.
We uncover the truth.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's finance minister has admitted he made a big financial mistake. Bill Morneau says he wrote a check today for more than $41,000 to repay the We charity for trips he and his family took back in 2017. The surprise came during Morneau's appearance before the Finance Committee. It's probing Morneau and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's role in a cabinet decision to award a multi-million-dollar contract to We to run a student grant program. The opposition had plenty of questions today, including how does anyone forget they owed $41,000? Abigail Beeman is following this for us tonight. Abigail.
Well, Donna, some late breaking news here following an afternoon of explosive testimony by the finance minister. We now know the prime minister will testify at the very same committee. That's a rare event. His office says the timing is still being worked out.
I want to apologize for this error on my part. It's a mistake. I think it was a mistake on my part.
Innumerable mea culpas from a finance minister who tried to explain why earlier in the day he wrote a check to We for tens of thousands of dollars for 2 family trips to Kenya in 2017 and Ecuador, of which he'd already paid $52,000 in personal expenses, but didn't know about the rest.
Today, I wrote a check in payment of $41,366. I expected and always had intended to pay the full cost of these trips, and it was my responsibility to make sure that was done. Not doing so, even unknowingly, is not appropriate. I want to apologize for this error.
The average Canadian living in Red Deer or Halifax that goes on a trip would notice if there was say a $400 expense that they didn't pay. Maybe a hotel room for a couple of nights that never got charged them, and they paid immediately. But you're telling me that on this obviously very luxurious trip, that $41,000 of expenses happened right under your nose, and you didn't know about it until it suddenly, through an epiphany, came to your attention the very day you were to testify in a parliamentary committee about it.
But there's more. Morneau's family also made 2 $50,000 donations to We, one in June of 2018 and one in June of this year related to COVID-19. The same month, the Prime Minister announced We would lead the $900 million student grant program.
I formally asked the Ethics Commissioner to review this information as part of his examination.
Have you read the Conflict of Interest Act?
I believe when I first came into office, I would have had access to all of those acts.
If you don't really remember the Conflict of Interest Act, you remember the Aga Khan ruling by the Ethics Commissioner, because it seems that he made direct rulings about a situation that you are now in. Isn't there someone in your office who would tell you, come on, Minister, these are the rules. This is the law of the land. It applies to you as well.
Conservatives are calling for his resignation. Morneau says he'll keep working for Canadians.
Abigail, there is another thread to this story. The contract the government awarded to We and then cancelled went to the We Charity Foundation, not the We Charity itself. Why is that raising red flags?
Well, Donna, that's a separate entity that only received charitable status last year. Its stated purpose is to hold tens of millions of dollars in real estate. A charity lawyer tells Global News this revelation is shocking.
It would be like saying I gave money to a particular charity, but in fact you gave it to a different one. It certainly doesn't reflect well in terms of the transparency that we've seen on this particular deal. As soon as the deal became very controversial, they should have just released all the information, especially the agreement.
Now, We tells Global News the use of multiple entities is not uncommon, saying it made the foundation the, quote, contracting party with the government on the advice of its lawyers to protect We Charity's pre-existing charitable assets. Donna?
All right, Abigail Beeman in Ottawa. Lots of questions. The opposition wants an independent investigation launched into harassment allegations that have emerged about the Governor General. CBC News quotes anonymous sources who say they quit working at Rideau Hall because Governor General Julie Payette created what they call a toxic environment. The report alleges Payette yelled at, belittled, and publicly humiliated employees. Global News has corroborated the claims with a former Rideau Hall employee. The Office of the Governor General denies the allegations. The statement says, "We deeply regret this reporting, which is in stark contrast to the reality of working at the OSGG." It goes on to say no formal complaint regarding harassment has been made. The NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the government and the Prime Minister in particular must look into the allegations.
There is no question, there is an obligation, a responsibility of the Prime Minister, in this case with the Governor General and the complaints that we've seen, to do something to follow up with those complaints. And that needs to happen.
Every Canadian has the right to a safe, secure workspace free from harassment, and that is extremely important. That's why we move forward on June 22nd with announcements on strengthening the oversight in federally regulated agencies and environments, including the public service.
The Prime Minister has not said if he will conduct a formal investigation. Payette herself has not commented on the allegations. In a landmark decision that could have lasting effects on both sides of the border, a federal judge has ruled Canada's Safe Third Country Agreement violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The agreement requires refugee claimants seek protection in the first safe country they arrive in. Under the agreement, those that arrive at an official point of entry on land from the U.S. are ineligible to make a refugee claim in Canada. In her ruling, Judge Anne-Marie McDonald says there is significant evidence ineligible claimants returned to the U.S. under the agreement face risks and challenges of being detained as a penalty. She emphasized Canada couldn't turn a blind eye to evidence. This immigration lawyer says the ruling makes sense.
The surprising thing is that it took this long. What appears to be happening in the United States is a policy of discouraging refugees, and that now has been the sort of the crack in the armor of this Safe Third Country Agreement.
The ruling gives Parliament 6 months to respond before invalidating the Safe Third Country Agreement. Well, we know parents across the country are wondering as September edges closer whether their kids will be back in the classroom. Several provinces are rolling out their back-to-school plans. There's a chance, though, they could be derailed if the number of COVID-19 cases keeps rising, as they have been in Canada's 4 largest provinces. Many cases are linked to bars, restaurants, and parties where younger people are coming into close contact with each other. This is a beach in Vancouver's Stanley Park last night. Crowds of people packed a weekly drum circle held on the beach there. Though many people are following public health guidance, it's clear some are not. And because of that, public health officers fear there could be an explosive rise in cases. As Heather Yourex-West reports, the provinces are banking on good behavior to get children back in school by the fall.
When students in Nova Scotia head back to class this September, a lot of things will have changed.
Masks will be mandatory on buses and in the hallways and common areas of high schools, and anyone who wants to wear a mask for their own benefit is free to do so.
There will be no lockers, and young students will be placed in cohorts, all in an effort to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Though health officials admit classrooms cannot be made risk-free.
We will almost certainly identify cases of COVID-19 in students and staff in the fall.
In Alberta, where mask use among students will not be required, in-person learning is set to resume as well. even though infections in that province are on the rise. New case counts in Alberta are now among the highest per capita in the country and have risen sharply over the last few weeks. On July 1st, 30 new cases were reported. On Tuesday, that number was up to 141.
I am concerned by the continued rise in active cases. Our health system is watching the situation closely, but I want to be clear. We all have a role to play in reducing the rise in cases that we are seeing.
The best thing that we can do to protect people in school is keep community transmission to the lowest rate possible.
Social gatherings among younger adults have become a source of concern for health officials. Many of the country's most recent infections have been among this demographic. If current trends continue, or if the number of percent positive cases climbs past 3%, this infectious disease doctor believes policymakers will have to take a harder line.
Hopefully we don't see that, but if you're starting to see indications of that, we're going to have to reevaluate what we're doing and perhaps pull back in certain realms.
It's why Calgary City Council voted to make mask wearing mandatory while inside public places.
One of the main reasons we did this was so we can get our hands around the current outbreak, which is scary and big, so that kids can go back to school.
And with the school year a little more than a month away, there is little time to waste. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Saskatchewan is reporting its highest number of daily new cases today since the start of this pandemic. 60 more positive cases were reported. 43 of them are people living in one Hutterite colony, about 200 kilometers west of Regina. A total of 17 Hutterite colonies in Saskatchewan are now dealing with outbreaks. The Premier is urging people to stay in their own community as much as possible to help limit the spread. The United States is on track to hit another disturbing milestone in this pandemic. Nearly 4 million Americans have now tested positive for the virus, and those are just the official numbers. Experts say there are likely many more undetected cases. And in a sign of how this pandemic is progressing, California now has surpassed New York as the state with the most confirmed cases. More than 413,000 people there have tested positive. After months of downplaying the crisis, President Donald Trump now admits it will get worse before it gets better. Jackson Proskow reports.
In Hidalgo County, Texas, hospitals, morgues, and funeral homes are at the breaking point.
We normally do about maybe 6 to 10 funerals a month, and right now we're doing almost 10 a week.
Out of desperation, local officials issued a stay-at-home order. The state of Texas blocked them from enforcing it.
Unfortunately, our hospital rooms look like war zones.
In California, a new daily record with nearly 13,000 new cases reported in just 24 hours. The U.S. military has sent teams to strained hospitals. As the virus surges in more and more new places, the lack of a coordinated national strategy has left a patchwork of responses and requirements. New York expanded its quarantine to travelers from 31 states, including Maryland, where officials in Baltimore ordered restaurants and bars to close their doors after a sudden increase in cases.
What we really need is a national mandate from the top to indicate what we need to be doing to protect one another.
It will probably, unfortunately, get worse before it gets better.
Tuesday's frank admission from President Donald Trump does not change the fact that the virus is still running rampant.
The virus will disappear. It will disappear.
States continue to grapple with testing shortages and climbing rates of death and hospitalization. The top infectious disease expert in the U.S. issued a blunt warning that it may not be enough.
I think we ultimately will get control of it. I don't really see us eradicating it.
But with many states refusing to roll back their reopenings while pushing ahead with plans to get kids back into the classroom in just a few weeks, there seems to be few options left for bringing the virus under control. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
New details about the case of two Quebec girls murdered by their father. Coming up, what the police reveal about the timeline. Last week, search teams spent days in a wooded area outside Quebec City looking for Martin Carpentier and his two daughters. Well, today the police said they now have evidence all three of them were dead before that search even began. As Mike Armstrong explains, investigators believe Carpentier killed his daughters and himself within hours of a mysterious car accident. And a warning, this story does contain disturbing details.
Police now admit that even before they issued an Amber Alert, it appears all 3 people they were looking for were already dead. The question then is why it took so long, nearly a day. Well, everything investigators had in the first hours after the girls disappeared said their father wasn't a threat. That includes talking to family.
We weren't worried that the father would hurt the daughters.
The night of July 8th, Martin Carpentier had taken his daughters for ice cream. They were headed in the direction of their mother's home as though they were going to be dropped off, but they never made it. There was a single-car crash, an accident, police say, around this spot. The 3 were last seen on foot crossing the highway and headed into the forest. It would take searchers 3 days to find the girls' bodies, but police now believe they were dead within 12 hours.
While the daughters had been hurt in a car crash, they were killed. They were killed by a blunt object used by the suspect at that place, at that area.
Now, also in those first hours, police believe Carpentier killed himself. They now confirm they had checked the spot where his body was found, in fact, twice. The forest was just too dense to see it. They defend being tight-lipped during the search. They say they didn't want to give details about what they were doing or call Carpentier a suspect in case he was listening. But they insist they tried everything, including when they found one of Carpentier's sandals.
Investigators went as far as walking barefoot to see how difficult it was to move in that forest, not wearing any shoes. That's how far we went.
The criminal part of this investigation is now over. The job of trying to explain what happened and why now falls to the coroner. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Still ahead, the fire in France that forced 2 boys to make a brave jump. There was no time to hesitate as this apartment in southeastern France went up in flames. 2 young boys, you can see there, jumped from their 3rd-story window. Thankfully, a group of people was there on the ground to catch them. The boys, aged 10 and 3, weren't injured. Local media reports they were taken to the hospital for smoke inhalation. China is promising to retaliate after the U.S. government ordered the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, to be shut down within 72 hours. Smoke was seen rising from inside the consulate compound last night as aerial footage appeared to show staff burning documents. The Trump administration says the decision to close the diplomatic mission was done in order to protect intellectual property and the private information of Americans. It's an unprecedented move in the 41 years since China and the U.S. established diplomatic relations. China has 5 consulates in the U.S., plus its embassy in Washington. Unmasking myths next, fact-checking claims about face masks. This was Prince Philip's first public appearance in months. He took part in a military ceremony at Windsor Castle. The 99-year-old Duke of Edinburgh has formally retired from royal duties, but he does still keep active. A parallel ceremony was held to welcome his daughter-in-law, the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, as the new Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles. And Prince George showed off a gap-toothed grin in new photos released to mark his 7th birthday. They were taken last month by his mother, Kate Middleton. George is the eldest of Kate and Prince William's 3 children. Well, to mask or not to mask, that really shouldn't be a question anymore. Covering our nose and mouth does reduce the risk of spreading COVID-19 to other people. Health officials around the world all agree that wearing a non-medical mask in situations when we can't be physically distant from other people is one of the key ways of limiting a new pandemic surge. But there's a great deal of misleading information out there that some people are latching onto as an excuse not to put on a mask. So we sent our Jeff Semple on a myth-busting mission about masks.
It's fast become a familiar sight. Across the country, marches against mandatory masks.
I'm just tired of all the conflicting information that we're getting from different sources.
And he's not wrong. A quick search online turns up a ton of conflicting claims. Warnings that masks weaken your immune system, increase toxins and carbon dioxide, and decrease oxygen, causing brain damage, even death.
That really doesn't make any biological sense to me. And it's ironic because actually COVID does decrease oxygen absorption. COVID causes brain damage.
So this is an oxygen sat probe.
We put that theory to the test, checking my oxygen levels while wearing a surgical mask, then a regular cloth mask, and finally, a medical-grade N95 mask.
And 100%. As you can see, the oxygen saturation doesn't change whatever mask you're wearing.
I even tried wearing all 3 masks simultaneously.
At 99% with all 3 masks.
Not comfortable, but...
I know.
Dr. Thasleem Nimji and her colleagues wear masks all day, every day.
For long procedures, surgeons and those in the room are wearing masks and able to perform your surgery without any concern about their own safety.
On this Canadian Facebook page, users share tips on how to circumvent mandatory masks and claim the virus can easily slip through the cracks. COVID-19 is indeed tiny, around 0.1 microns, but it doesn't travel solo. The particle attaches itself to a much larger droplet or aerosol, and studies have shown that good quality cotton masks prevent more than 85% of those particles from escaping.
The key is also the material. If you do them like a 2-layer cotton-based fabric mask, would offer quite a good protection.
Scarves and t-shirts are thought to be less effective, but experts admit there's still much they don't know.
We're still exploring the efficacy of masks as a strategy to stop the spread of COVID-19. And when you have uncertain science, it can be more difficult to pass on to the public a clear message.
What is clear is that the benefits of masks far outweigh the risks, and in the absence of a vaccine, could be our best weapon. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Here in Canada is the city of Swift Current, Saskatchewan, also known as Speedy Creek. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.